just when you thought things couldn't get any more ridiculous in the UK, we have a report that a migrant has borrowed a woman's identity to pose as an NHS healthcare assistant for 2 whole months without being spotted. Now, I was kidding about the not getting more ridiculous thing. I wish I was kidding about the story, which I am not. This story is about Lucius Njoku, who fraudulently used the name of an agency nurse, Joyce George, to work a series of shifts for 2 whole months as a healthcare assistant at the Countess of Chester Hospital in Cheshire. Now, that hospital might ring a bell because that was the same hospital that Lucy Letby worked at, and many people criticised the administration of said hospital, which, of course, this is not going to do the hospital any favours, particularly in light of Lucy Letby's story. And by the way, I hope you like the new top, which replaces the t-shirt because my son liked it and nicked it, therefore I bought this in replacement. I've got a black one as well. There's a few others linked down below. If you want to support the channel, I'll be very grateful. There's a whole load of merch there. Please do go and check it out. Now, despite wearing the name tag, which had her photo on it, this migrant was able to work in this role unsuspected for 2 whole months, meaning nobody even checked in any great detail the name card, much less the photograph. And now he admits fraud by false representation, which is, of course, making a dishonest statement to make a gain for yourself or a loss to somebody else. Now, police attended Miss George's home and found Mr. Njoku there and seized both of their phones, which showed communications between them about the work patterns. At Chester Magistrates Court, Mr. Njoku, who lives with his NHS worker wife at a different address, admitted fraud by false representation. He was sentenced to 16 weeks in prison, suspended for 12 months, so he doesn't go to prison. Now, on the one hand, we have Keir Starmer saying that digital ID for every adult in the UK is going to stop illegal working and that everybody is safe and so on. That's clearly not going to be the case if we have people working literally in someone else's place, not even another man, in the place of a woman, with her photograph on the name tag. Now, if we want to eliminate illegal working, this is probably one way of doing it, actually checking the name tags of who's working at the place, which is, I suppose, why we have name tags in the first place. Now, it says in the report here, it is not known whether he'll be deported from the UK as he's a dependent on his wife's work visa. Miss George fled the UK after she was charged with fraud, and she's thought to be back in Nigeria. A warrant has been issued for her arrest. Now, like I said, Keir Starmer tries to assure everybody that we're all safe with digital ID. On the other hand, we have another story of even date from the BBC where the Ministry of Defence is investigating claims that Russian hackers have stolen hundreds of sensitive military documents and published them on the dark web. The MOD said in a statement that it was actively investigating the claims that information relating to the MOD has been published on the dark web. For those of you who are not familiar, the dark web is the bit of the internet where is usually not indexed by search engines, not usually directly accessible, and lots of dark and dangerous stuff is posted on there. Now, this video is not sponsored, but if you want a discount for NordVPN, which will help to protect you from malicious websites, there's a link with the code BBB in the description below. And if you want a little hint as to what they might do with digital ID, this is a screenshot which I believe is NatWest, which is monitoring your carbon footprint for everything you do. Fun and leisure, groceries, transport, shopping, eating out. And if the authorities then decide that they are hell-bent on reaching a certain level of emissions per person, they might start to restrict you, and they might do it via the banks. And so if they see that you've exceeded your monthly or whatever limit for eating out in terms of carbon emissions, this might be one way that they firstly track it and then potentially limit what you're able to do. And this might sound a little bit conspiracy theory-esque and a little bit far-fetched, but if you wind back just a few years, could you even have imagined that banks would be tracking, monitoring and feeding back your carbon footprint for buying some groceries or going to a hair and beauty salon to have your hair cut? In other news, Labour has apparently abandoned the Islamophobia definition, which I personally think is good news, because even if you have absolutely nothing against those of the Muslim faith, which I think is probably the vast majority of you, a definition for Islamophobia could still hinder your free speech and cause you issues if you make certain complaints, judging by the original definition of Islamophobia. But apparently that's now been scrapped in favour of an anti-Muslim hate definition, which is understood, according to sources, to have been drafted with the aim of clearly defining hatred towards Muslims whilst protecting free speech. Now, I have to express some caution here, because we already have an offence of stirring up racial hatred with words or other behaviour or displaying written material. And I already think that is a little bit vague for what we would expect for the criminal law. This is in Section 18 of the Public Order Act 1986, which is where a person uses words or behaviour or displays written material which is threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behaviour, or displaying any such written material, which is threatening, abusive, or insulting, if they intend thereby to stir up racial hatred, or, and this is the one that I have a bit of an issue with, having regard to all the circumstances, racial hatred is likely to be stirred up thereby. Now, if they are setting any kind of definition of any faith hatred, regardless if it's Muslim or otherwise, by creating this definition, it is then shoehorning lots of different things into the alternative offence of Part 1B here, under this offence, which I already think is a little bit vague. Now, why do I say that? Because, as I said in my caveat, I don't encourage anybody to stir up hatred or say anything hateful to anybody else, anything of the sort. But if this alternative part of the offence, which is having regard to all the circumstances, racial hatred is likely to be stirred up, that could be seen as a subjective test. It's actually an objective test, but it could be argued subjectively, in that somebody could argue that in the circumstances, racial hatred was likely to be stirred up because somebody said they don't like X or Y thing. And therefore, it may then be argued, particularly if there's a definition that shoehorns it into 1B, that they've committed this offence, when otherwise they wouldn't have done. And so I already think that this is a little bit vague, but by creating any kind of definition, it could end up shoehorning lots of different things by some sort of pseudo-law into this offence that it didn't originally intend. And as I say, I think it's already a little bit vague, so that's the danger that we've got there. For example, if we were to bring everything back to this original story here, and you were to say publicly that you hate the fact that certain individuals are taking advantage of our systems and NHS and benefit system and so on and so forth, and it was somehow shoehorned by one of the definitions they come up with into this offence, that might mean what was originally free speech is now an offence because they've got a definition that shoehorns it in. That's why I think there's a problem with it. I think there's a problem with any kind of definition of this nature, with the caveat that I don't encourage people. I would actively discourage anybody to say hateful things to each other. But at the same thing, we do have free speech, and we can't maintain free speech whilst we're telling people what they can and can't say, save where there is a criminal law that prohibits such speech, which, as I say, is already a little bit too vague. But either way, leave me your thoughts and comments in the box below. And if you do want to support the channel, some of you have nicely asked me how to support the channel. One way is you can grab yourself some merch here. You can check out my sponsors and support them because they support the channel. And of course, I'm grateful to all of you for subscribing and for watching, and I'll see you next time.